the deficit in terms of the water under the groundwater, which especially the south of the country relies on a lot, that's going to take at least 6 months to restore those deficits. And the Met Office long 3-month forecast is for until out to about October for probably drier than usual. So there's no great prospect of, we don't just need rain, right? We need abnormal levels of rain.
So with nearly 3/4 of England in drought, it has been a very, very long, hot summer. It's not over yet. Parks have resembled dust bowls for weeks now. There is still no rain in sight. 45 million people are living in an area experiencing a flash drought, according to the Environment Agency. Southern Water has applied to the government to ban washing cars with hose pipes and to prevent private swimming pools from being filled. The door slam was Adam Vaughn entering our studio, the Times' environment editor. Hi, Adam.
Good afternoon.
Have you caught your breath?
Yes.
Yes.
Just about.
Good. Let's talk specifically about which areas are now in drought. It's a large part of the country now.
It is. So at the end of last month, around half of England was in drought status, and now we're up to 71%. And as you may be unsurprised to hear, primarily it's those regions in the south and the east. So, for example, areas in Sussex and the Solent and Leicestershire were some of those that moved into drought yesterday. And obviously it's not uniform. The northwest has been a little bit wetter, as it is prone to be, and it's a different picture again in Scotland. Wales has been very dry, like England.
What is the term flash drought about?
So flash drought, it sounds like a great dance or something, doesn't it? The flash drought is not a sort of technical term, but it's being used to describe the fact that if you cast your mind back, it was a very wet winter, and if I'd have told you in, say, March that, there'd be a hosepipe ban in the summer, you may have laughed at me because it was still quite wet then. And it's really just a way of characterising the fact that it's come on very fast, because it's quite simple, really. It's been very hot, and when it's hot, people use more water, companies use more water, farmers use more water, and so actually it's happened very quickly this time, compared to, say, last year, where it was a bit more obvious that it was coming.
Right. An awful lot of people already know the rules about domestic water use, so you can't use a hose pipe at the moment. If you're lucky enough to have a swimming pool, you're not allowed to refill that. So
the hose pipe ban's currently covering about 27 million people. Bizarrely, despite me living in the south in Sussex, I don't actually have one at home, so I could be gaily spraying my garden with a hose pipe. I'm not, I would stress, for moral reasons. But the limits are you still water your garden, but you must use buckets and so on, and cans. If you are disabled in certain other groups, there is exemptions for them to. So it's not like no one can use a hose pipe, for example. It's just really about common sense, about trying to. I think the figures I saw when I was speaking to people yesterday were in the areas where people have got a hosepipe ban, the water companies are seeing demand down by about 9%. So as a reminder that it does make a difference. Right. There's a certain bit of civic duty here.
But what about companies? So if you're running a car wash, that's your business, are you placed under the same kind of water ban too?
So right now the hosepipe ban doesn't extend to stuff like that. What might happen if it continues to be incredibly dry and we start thinking more seriously about security of supply is further steps. So one of those is a non-essential use ban in the jargon, which is basically a step up from a hosepipe ban, and that can prohibit certain types of water use for businesses, and that can include, for example, it would mean a business couldn't do outdoor watering of plants, it would mean they couldn't top up a swimming pool. So that would be quite a lot. That would be quite an escalation. We don't know yet. The Secretary of State, Angela Eagle, for Environment, she has about 28 days now to decide on whether Southern Water can take that next step.
There are so many people who are busy watering their gardens with small watering cans and other utensils whilst swearing at the water company under their breath, because some of this, Adam, is caused by leakage and poor infrastructure, isn't it?
And leaks is clearly an issue. They have come down, but they are still unacceptably high. And I think the interesting thing as well is, unfortunately, with this weather, it does have a sort of the companies have all, I've been looking through some of the companies' responses, and they all claim obviously that they've been stepping up their leak fixing plans, but the unfortunate truth is that the dry ground means pipes moving around and actually causes pipes to burst, and then that obviously pushes up leaks. So I think clearly, some people, Zach Polanski, for example, with the Green Party, want to nationalise water companies. They're jumping on this to say, look, this shows you what's broken about the sector and why we should nationalise them all. Andy Burnham obviously has talked slightly about ownership of water companies. Let's see what he does.
What lessons can be learnt from this summer that we'd actually be able to put in place before next summer?
I think really that this is not exceptional, really. I hate the phrase new normal, but we have had droughts now in 22, 25, 26. We should come to be expecting these. Maybe some of these restrictions on what would arguably be sort of non-essential use, some of the hosepipe ban stuff maybe could come in earlier, perhaps. I think clearly longer term we're talking about boring things like reservoirs. There's 8 or 9 being built. The nearest one, Thicket in Portsmouth, which I went down to have a look at a few months ago, that's not due to open until be full until the early 2030s. So those are really long-term bets. But yeah, in the meantime, it is kind of maybe bringing some of those limits earlier. Maybe as a consumer, if you can afford it, buy more water-efficient products. That things like toilets, showers that have aerators and things like that, and double flush and all the rest of it. Fairly common sense stuff. But the reality is, in the very short term, there's not a huge amount we can do beyond hoping for rain.
This issue of reservoirs is very telling as well, isn't it? Because we haven't invested enough in looking ahead to the predicted changes in our climate and building accordingly. So that point you just made about a reservoir that's already being built, but it won't be full for another 5 years, 6 years?
Thereabouts, yeah. So I mean, the stat that gets bandied around a lot, which is extraordinary and is true, is that no major reservoir has been built in the country since the early 90s. And that clearly is now starting to look like a bit of a dereliction of duty.
And is that a government thing or a government in partnership with private water companies thing?
I think there's multiple reasons. I think it is partly a government thing. I think it is also partly a planning system thing, which obviously does slightly fall under the government. So, for example, Thames Water's wanted to build one in Abingdon in Oxfordshire, and there was a failed efforts around 2010-ish, thereabouts, to do it then. They're trying again now. I think, I think clearly some of those previous efforts should have been pushed through, and where the fault blames, I don't know. I mean, you could blame. I think you can equally blame the industry maybe for not engaging well enough with people, as well as the government for not ensuring planning reforms made those happen.
How long does it take for a drought to be rectified by rainfall?
In this case, it's going to take a heck of a long time. So the Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, who like the research institute, who are the experts on this, they were saying yesterday, I was having a chat with one of their hydrologists, they reckon that the deficit in terms of the water under the groundwater, which especially the south of the country relies on a lot, that's going to take at least 6 months to restore those deficits. And the Met Office 3-month forecast is until out to about October for probably drier than usual. So there's no great prospect of, we don't just need rain, right? We need abnormal levels of rain. So I guess we're basically hoping for a repeat of last winter, where, if you remember, it was bucketing it down for weeks on end. But that's a strange thing to be wishing for, but that's where we are.
But that is the climate prediction, isn't it? That we will have much warmer but wetter winters, and then these incredibly hot, dry summers.
100%. So there'll be a lot of climate scientists who'll be saying "I told you so," because for several years people in the Met Office, University of Reading, University of East Anglia, so on and so forth, have been saying what climate change will bring you is hotter and drier summers and wetter, warmer winters. And what we've seen over the last 12 months is almost like a textbook version of that, right? A very wet winter. If you remember, it was very mild. It only got cold for a few days. Very little in the way of frost and things like that, classic winter signs. And then we've gone into this now, right? I genuinely at the start of this summer wasn't pitching drought stories, right? And yet here we are.
We really need to talk about the farmers as well, don't we? Because they are the hardest hit, and for many who are already teetering on the brink because of all kinds of other pressures on them, this summer has been an absolute nightmare. What can they do?
So as you say, there's a whole bunch of factors. There's the geopolitical ones that came from earlier in the year with Iran and cost of fertiliser and fuel after that, which I heard from a lot of farmers about. And then more recently, in terms of, I'm hearing from, cereal farmers, they're looking like one of the worst harvests on record. Livestock farmers, it's bad news because obviously it's this hot, anyone in the south will see there's not a lot of grass at the moment, so that means they have to buy in the feed. In terms of what those farmers can do, in the short term, hope for some more support from the government perhaps. I think longer term, some of them will be thinking, am I, producing the right crops? Is it even make sense being in food production at all? I think some of them will be asking themselves. That's certainly the conversation I had with some of them when their crops were rotting underwater a couple of years ago during an incredibly wet winter. So I think it's They are at the mercy of the weather, and the weather has been very erratic in the last few years.
There are quite often stories about how food shortages will come to pass. Do you think that will happen as an inevitable result of this drought?
I don't think we'll see food shortages per se. I think we'll see issues with certain items, right? So I think what's been striking about this is it's not just, we obviously talk a lot about just the UK, but looking a bit wider than that, Europe as a whole has had extreme heat. It was only a couple of weeks ago I was talking to people about the fact that there's no cucumbers. So a lot of our cucumbers in summer get grown in Morocco and Spain and imported over here, and it had been so hot over there it had affected the flowering process, and so they hadn't developed, and then there was a sort of 3-week lag till they could get more ones going, and so the only place you could get cucumbers was the Netherlands. They were charging like more than £1 a pop for a cucumber. So I think you'll see, I've heard people saying that will come with tomatoes. The heat is bad for brassicas like broccoli, so later in the season we might see issues with those. I think it will eventually obviously feed in to food prices because farmers are just going to pass on costs, right? That's what they have to do. I don't think we're going to see shortages per se, but I wouldn't be surprised if you go down to your local Tesco or Waitrose and there's maybe some missing salad items or something else.
Yes, yeah. Did you buy a lot of cucumbers when you
I'm
eventually
absolutely stocked in myself. I've got like hundreds of them. I'm ready for this COVID toilet roll. I'm fully prepared to cash in on that.
I don't think that you can use a cucumber for toilet roll, Adam, but good luck. Adam Vaughan is the Times' environment editor. Thank you very much. Nice to see you.